In my last video, one of the tips that I shared was creating a good rhythm and schedule for your homeschool day and how that can make a big impact on your homeschool in general. And today I thought I would share with you my tips for creating the best homeschool schedule you have ever had. Hello there, I am Christine, a second-generation homeschooling mama of 3 kiddos. I went to say 6 kiddos because I've been homeschooling for 6 years and my brain's tired. One thing that I particularly love and am passionate about is curating a schedule that works very well for your homeschool. I am a big advocate for schedules. I'm a big advocate for flexible schedules, let's put it that way. I very rarely engage in online debate, but recently I saw a post shared by an individual online about her homeschool schedule, and another homeschool mom hopped on there and started to go on and on about all the evils of scheduling and how unnecessary it is and that children do not need schedules. And I was just like, agree to disagree. And I may have left a couple of comments and we just weren't going to agree with each other. Regardless, I'm not going to share this video to convince you to schedule and that having a schedule is fantastic. I'm just going to share with you the tips for creating a really good schedule, because schedules can be done poorly and they can turn into something that you are a slave to, and that is not something I want for any homeschool parent. But schedules can be incredibly life-giving when they are done well. Let's go straight into the first point. So the first point I want to make is to schedule your priorities first. I specifically want to point out that homeschooling is a priority. I see this all the time where there are homeschool moms saying, I don't know when we're going to sit down and do math because we've got to get to gymnastics and art class, and then we've got homeschool co-op, and then we're doing this. Guys, we're missing the point, okay? I know that all the extracurriculars are fun, but homeschooling is actually really important. It is a priority and we should treat it as such. Therefore, we need to put it down in our schedule. We don't need to plan homeschooling around the rest of life. And I know that there will be pushback on that from some people, and that's fine. Live your life that way. But for many of us, I think this is something we need to hear, that homeschooling is a priority. I remember having to say to people eventually, we are not available from this time to this time because I'm teaching my children. You would not go into a school classroom and disrupt the classroom because you want to ask the teacher a question. No, she's at her job. She is teaching children, and we should treat our homeschooling the same way. And it makes our homeschooling more productive because we're not being interrupted. Our mind is focused on teaching our children. So if you are not already doing that, make homeschooling your priority, okay? Whatever that looks like for you, make it your priority. Of course, there are going to be other things that are priorities, appointments and et cetera, but just keep the main things, okay? And remember what is actually important to you and schedule around that instead of trying to fit that in around everything else, because it's just how we tend to do things. And I will just encourage you to take a look at your extracurriculars and decide how many of them are actually really important to your child and your homeschooling, and how many you're doing just because it's a fun experience, which there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not taking from other things like English and math and the real foundational things we do need to focus on. Second, schedule rest. This is something that I've only very recently understood the importance of. We so often fit rest in whenever we can instead of first scheduling it into our day. And I didn't realize this is what it was in words, but I have always done this to some degree with my children, in that we always had nap time in the afternoon, and then when that ended for my kids, when they outgrew that, we turned it into quiet time. But I was terrible at doing quiet time myself. I would use that time to catch up on work and do chores and stuff. It's only really this year that I've been very strict about, no, from this time to this time when my children are having quiet time, I am having rest time. And I would encourage you as a homeschool mom who I've been burnt out plenty of times, guys. I know what that's like. Schedule rest into your day, okay? It's not selfish, it's not wrong, it's not unproductive. In fact, it's the opposite of all of those things. You are going to restore your mind and your body and all of those things by resting, and it's very productive because you're actually going to be able to do more work. So please schedule that in to your week and into your days. Schedule rest. So priorities under that should be rest. Next up is to consider everything. I think as mums, we tend to have this running to-do list and mental load that we don't realize we're carrying around with us all the time, or every now and again we realize it when we're like having a breakdown. But for the most part, we tend to carry it around. And when we think of doing a schedule, we're like, okay, well, we're gonna do math from this time to this time. And we don't consider that we also are gonna need to put potatoes onto boil at this time of the day and make sure that we cook this up, and then the laundry needs to go out at that time. But we don't write it down. We just like keep this running tally in our heads and we think we'll just fit everything in, and then we get really frustrated because it's not fitting in or we've forgotten it. Schedule it into your day. Consider everything you do in your day and figure out where it best fits and include that in your schedule, because it will open your eyes, first of all, to all the things that you're doing, but also help you to be able to move things around in your day that make more sense and help to simplify your day a lot more, because you might be able to do things at a certain time that work better at that time than they would at another, but because you're not writing it down, you hadn't even considered that. So really do sit down and think about everything you do in a day and include that in your schedule. Don't just take for granted that it's going to happen. And that point leads nicely into our next point, which is to be realistic. Again, we carry around these things in our head, and this applies to, general homemaking and work and school as well. We assume things are going to take a certain amount of time, or we think in our heads it takes this long, but in reality, it takes twice as long, or only 5 minutes as opposed to 15 minutes. So be realistic about your expectations in your school and how much you're going to get done, how much you're scheduling your day. For us, we have one extracurricular we go to once a week, and that starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I wouldn't do anything earlier than that, because then I would have to hurry through our homeschooling. And I hate that, because it means that we can't stop and have lots of discussion. I don't like that. So be realistic about how your homeschool looks and what you can actually fit into a day and into a week before you start writing it down, because that's when you tend to get burnt out and frustrated, and it's not fun for anybody. And then my final point, but probably my most important one, aside from writing down your priorities in your schedule, is to be realistic with flexibility and margin. I think this is where most of the pushback comes from with people who don't understand how good schedules can be, is because they've been under a schedule that is run like a military base, where everyone has to be somewhere at a certain time and you've only got this amount of time to get things done, and then we must be at this point, and that, it's too rigid, okay? I am not advocating for schedules like that. I will always be an advocate for a schedule with flexibility and margin built into it, because life happens. We have got to make space for the character training that we need to do with our children. Sometimes we have to sit with a child for half an hour to work through an issue that they are having. We get sick. People get sick, you have to be able to build that into your margin. Sometimes there's going to be a really fun learning opportunity that comes up in your community, and you're going to need to be able to say, okay, we're going to put math and English aside just for today so we can go and engage in this, because this is only here for a short time. So build that into your schedule wherever you can and give yourself that margin. A way that I have done that in our schedule is to have a 4-day school week, because on Fridays, we clean the house, I catch up on work, I catch up on emails and, filming and things like that. I need time to do that. And so by having that extra flex day, it just gives me time to catch up on a bunch of stuff, and we will keep that for as long as I can. I'm not sure that we will be able to continue it into the high school years, but for now, it works really well for our family. And it gives us a lot more flexibility. So do our 6-week school terms that we do with our 1-week break. There's more flexibility in that for us. I know for some families, the way that practically looks is by doing year-round schooling instead of following the traditional school terms. So however that looks for you and your family, there's not going to be one thing for everybody, but however that works for you and your family, pick that and roll with it, enjoy it, and be confident in it, because that is truly what makes a schedule work well, is when it can be flexible. So I hope that these tips were helpful to you. You're never gonna find me sharing a schedule that I think is gonna work for everybody, because again, situations are so unique, but I do hope that these foundational tips really help you to have a practical mindset for how to build your schedule in your homeschooling. And I would love any tips that you guys have down below. There are so many different ways to schedule. There's loop scheduling and time blocking and all these kinds of things. Trust me, I've looked into it all over the years. I love it. And it helps me to be so much more focused and disciplined with my time when I have a good schedule in place. Yeah, I'm always learning and adapting. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.
What if the world had more of your smile? What if the wind could spread your love?